everybody. I am so excited to talk about this topic today. You have no idea. I am somebody who literally used to hate reading. I would go to great lengths to avoid reading books. And now, within the past year, it's completely taken over my life, and that is no exaggeration. And I'm so excited to share how I feel with you guys, because I know if you're watching this video, you probably feel the same way. But I have so much that I feel needs to be said, and I need to share it with somebody. I can't tell you guys, like, I've literally been searching for like a book club. I've been trying to talk people into reading my books so that I have somebody to talk to about this, and I have no one. So I figure I might as well put all of this energy into a YouTube channel. Nobody watches these videos. I literally don't care. It just makes me happy to be able to put out my thoughts and say the things that I need to say about these books, because it's all inside and I need to get it out. So that's why I'm here. I have so much stuff that I just need to talk about and get out into the world about how I'm feeling regarding these books. So I'm gonna talk to you guys all about it. Buckle in. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe. I figured this was the perfect time to get started because this could be kind of like a Bookmas thing. It's the beginning of December, and I would love to make this like a more consistent thing to do. Just because I have so much to talk about. I'm not even kidding. I could literally sit here and talk here for hours about these books, you guys. And I know if you're watching this video, you feel the same way. So thank you. Like, subscribe, join the fam. I would love to share my thoughts with you guys. Okay, so like I said, I am somebody who literally used to hate reading, you guys. I would be on Spark Notes. I literally, like when I was in high school, I had my dad buy me the summaries of all the books for summer reading, so I didn't actually have to read them. I hated it. My sister was obsessed. Like, she was a Twilight girly, and I did not understand how reading a book could be so fun. And now looking back on it, I'm like, wow, I have been missing out for so long. How did I wait so long to start reading books? And the whole reason that any of this started is because I don't know if any of you guys can relate, but I'm scrolling through TikTok, and of course I came across the book talk videos.
Recommendations. These are my Roman Empire.
Books that I would literally sell my soul to be able to read again.
Hear my thoughts on
Let's this first book will come as a surprise because it's my favorite book of all time. I can't talk about it. I have a quote of it.
And I got sucked in. I was like, what is it that I'm missing out on? Because this literally has a cult following and I need to jump on the bandwagon. And today, what I want to talk to you guys about are the books that got me into reading, and the reason that I am as obsessed with books as I am now, and what got me here. So the topic for today's video, I am going to be doing the 4 biggest fantasy series of 2024. These might not literally be the top 4 series. However, they were for me, and they have been on my radar everywhere I look, and that's why I started reading these books. If you guys have spent any time on social media, TikTok, literally even on TV, everywhere you look, it is about these books, in my opinion. And I'm gonna go over what they are right now. We are going to be delving into the Sarah J. Maas universe, or Maasverse, if you will. ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, and Crescent City. And then number 4, we're gonna go over Fourth Wing. Now, I have read all 4 of these series in the last year, and how many books is that? ACOTAR's 5, Crescent City is 3, plus 8, so 3 plus 8, 11, we don't know. ACOTAR's 5, Crescent City is 3, so that's 8, plus 8, that's 16, and 14 is 18 books. 18 books, you guys. I've read 18 books in the past year. Actually, I've read a little bit more than that, but we are just talking about fantasy series today because, you guys, it's just so good. It is my favorite thing in the world, and I'm not even kidding. I'm obsessed. I literally got a tattoo after one of these books. So let's get into it. Okay, the categories we are going to be rating these series on are the following. We are going to start with spice, then we're gonna hit plot. We are going to rate the female main character, the main book boyfriend. I know that a lot of these books have like sub characters, but we're going to be rating the main book boyfriend, and then we are going to be rating the world. I think when it comes to fantasy, romantasy, these are the most important categories and the things that are really gonna make or break a series, for me at least. So let's get into it. The first one I'm going to start with is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I have it right here. If you guys can't tell, I am a very big fan. You'll notice I don't have all of the physical copies of books because, you guys, here is the dilemma that I've been facing. I started reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. My sister bought me a Kindle, and now I'm so torn. It's like, do I want the physical copy? Do I want to read it on the Kindle? Do I want to listen on Audible? And you guys, I'm not even kidding. Some of these books, I have them in like all 3 versions because I can't figure out what I want to do. And I bounce back and forth between everything because sometimes the Kindle's convenient. Sometimes I want to listen, like if I'm driving somewhere. I don't know. I don't know if you guys can relate, but now I need to buy physical copies of all the books that I've already read because I want to have a nice bookshelf. So that's gonna be a thing. If you guys have recommendations, please let me know because it's so expensive to keep up with all this, like buying 3 versions of every book. But anyways, we got sidetracked. Let's start with ACOTAR. ACOTAR, this is the first fantasy series that I read. And let me tell you guys, when I got into it, the reason that I started reading this book, my sister was like, oh my gosh, all these people are telling me that this is such a good series and I'd love to read it with you. And I was like, you know what? Let's freaking do it. I've heard good things about it too. Let's see how it goes. And you guys, I'm not even kidding when I say I picked up the first book in this series, and I finished it in 1 weekend. And when I tell you, that's a crazy feat for me because I read so slow. And it was the first book that I read in a very long time, but I couldn't put it down. And that's crazy because the first book in the series of ACOTAR, there's 5 books total. The first book I would rate the lowest. They kind of like progressively got better. I can make a whole video based on like my ranking of all of the ACOTAR books, but the first one wasn't great. The reason it wasn't great is because of the world building. Like whenever you're getting into a fantasy series, it is a whole new world that needs to be set up for you. And so typically in the first book, there's not going to be that much going on because you just need to understand the characters, you need to understand the world, you need to understand the magic system, the politics. There's a lot of things that need to be set up. So when I was reading ACOTAR, I will say, looking back now, that was the first fantasy series that I read, and the world building didn't feel overwhelming to me. I feel like if you're looking for your first fantasy series that you want to read, ACOTAR is a really good starting point because the world building is not complicated. The characters are easy to understand. The magic is easy to understand. It's very relatable. And overall, it is a great starting point and still one of my favorite book series to this day. So let's get a little bit into my rating system. When it comes to the world of ACOTAR, I rated it a 4 out of 5. The reason for this is because when I was reading ACOTAR, I felt myself wanting to be in Prithian and not in my life. Like, does that make sense? Like, even from the very first book, when Feyre is in Spring Court, when I would put the book down, I was like, oh my God, I'm so upset that like, I'm not in the Spring Court right now. And looking back, like things changed throughout that book. I can't believe I ever felt that way, but like, it's beautiful. The world is beautiful. It's just such a feeling of like, it's like enchanted feeling. Like it makes you feel good, the world. There's parts of it that are scary, which I feel like is very needed. I wouldn't say it's like scary, like horror movie, but like there's certain creatures that are built to make you scared of them. And I think that's a really good thing. So world for ACOTAR, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Great. I love their world. It's beautiful. And the world building was very simple and easy to follow, so I can appreciate that. Let's move on to plot. I'm gonna say that this also got a 4 out of 5. The reason I'm giving this series a 4 out of 5 on plot is because there are certain parts of the series that I felt like were missing oomph, if that makes sense. Like, there were points in the plot that I felt like could have gone into more detail or something like that. There was just areas of the book where I felt like something was missing. For example, book number 4, Court of Frost and Starlight. That book, it's very, like, it's a beautiful story, okay? It gives you a break. These characters are going through hell. They've been to hell and back. This was a nice break for us to kind of just get happy, good, gushy feelings from these characters who so desperately needed it. But I found myself so bored reading that book. And there was just parts of the book that I was like, okay, that was kind of predictable. But overall, great plot, great storyline. I give it a 4 out of 5. Next thing I want to talk about is the female main character. In the ACOTAR series, Feyre is the female main character, and I am going to give her a 3 out of 5. Now, the reason for this is because I feel that Feyre was a very strong woman. Like, even when the book series is getting started, she's very, like, you see her as kind of invincible. She's strong. She's doing everything that she can for her family. I felt like she didn't have very many weak points, if that makes sense. So that makes it kind of hard to relate to a character, in my opinion. I love when we have like a character arc of somebody who's like down bad, not doing good, and then they go through this huge level of character development. Like, that is my favorite. And this was kind of lacking. I'm not saying that I don't love Feyre. I do love her, and I felt like the stakes were high. I was rooting for her. I always wanted her to do good. But there were points in the book where I found myself just getting frustrated with her, and I was like, come on. Can we not do this? Or can we not do that? Like, get it together. But otherwise, Feyre's great. Moving on from female main character, I want to talk about the main book boyfriend. The main book boyfriend from the ACOTAR series is Rhysand. And you guys, you might hate me for saying this, but he wasn't my favorite. And let me explain to you why. I feel like in this series, the anticipation, the build-up, and like who Rhys was at the beginning, like when there was banter, when they were kind of falling for each other, I was so hardcore for Rhys. But as things went on, like after they were together, I started to hate him. And the reason I feel that way is because, like, I feel like in Sarah J. Maas's writing, like, the buildup is great, the tension is great, but then once you get there, I felt like his character changed. There was like a lot that I felt like was lacking. He wasn't as much a great boyfriend as he was like a love interest, if that makes sense. I found myself by the 5th book, I was so annoyed with Rhysand, guys, and you might hate that, you might feel completely different. I know everybody completely stands him, and listen, I get it. But as time went on, it just was not the same, okay? So anyways, I'm giving Rhysand a 3 out of 5. And kind of piggybacking off the back of that, let's talk about the spice level, because I feel like when you're picking a book, you're either really into the spice or you're really not. And what I will say about the ACOTAR series is the plot definitely outweighs the spice, if that makes sense. Spice is there, but it's not the main driving factor of the book, I guess you could say. Spice in this book is more like, it makes you feel more connected to the characters for sure, but it's definitely not the main role. I did find myself, and I know you guys will all relate, you will be waiting for it, you'll be waiting for the build-up, you want something to happen so bad, and when it finally does, you're like, oh, yes. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Spice is not a huge point in this book. I will say the 5th book, which is my favorite, happens to have the most spice out of all of the books in the series, in my opinion. So if that's what you're waiting for, hang on to the end, because I'm telling you, book 5 is the best. It's my favorite. All right, so that's gonna wrap up ACOTAR for us. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, So the next book we are going to be going over, or I guess not book, the next series we're going to be going over is the Crescent City series. And let me just say, I feel like I read the Sarah J. Maas universe in the wrong order. And let me explain to you why that happened. So I read ACOTAR first, and then right when I finished it, the third Crescent City book was coming out. And I was like, oh my God, I need to be on the bandwagon. I need to finish the first two Crescent City books so I can read the third, and then I'll just read Throne of Glass after. And I feel like that was a mistake, and it might be what affects my ratings for this series in general. So Crescent City is a completely different world than ACOTAR. So we went from one plane to a complete other universe. I mean, it is a new universe in general, but they are complete opposites. So Crescent City is going to be your modern fantasy. The characters in this book, I did not feel like I connected to them as much as I connected to the characters in ACOTAR. And the reason for this, what I want to start off talking about with Crescent City is what I'm going to rate the world. And you guys, I did not love the fantasy, modern, like whatever was going on in this series. I didn't love it. I'm giving the world a 3 out of 5, and the reason I'm giving it that is because it was beautiful. When I was reading it, I was like, okay, I can picture all of these things, like this is how I see it. I see the vision. The reason it lost 2 stars is because the world building is just so complex. There's so much going on. There's so many different creatures, magic, futuristic things going on. It's kind of hard to keep up with. So when I was reading Crescent City, like specifically the first book, it was just so difficult for me to get into, especially going from ACOTAR to that. Like the world building is completely different. Crescent City is much more complicated in terms of world building, I would say. Is it bad? No, by no means is it bad. But it's gonna take a little bit more attention span and like paying attention to details and plugging things together in your brain. So moving on from that, I want to talk about the plot of Crescent City. The plot for Crescent City, I also gave a 3 out of 5. And the reason for that is because again, just like I said about the world, I did not feel very connected to the plot. While I was reading it, it was high stakes, but I didn't have the same feeling when I was reading that book as I did when I was rooting for Feyre. When I was reading this book, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I want to see what's gonna happen. I want it to turn out good, but I wasn't like, the stakes weren't as high, you know what I mean? Like, it was a good plot. There were some twists and turns throughout the series that I really enjoyed. There's things that aren't completely predictable to a certain extent. And then you get into a crazy crossover in the third book, which I wanted to be so excited for, but to me, it really fell flat. They could have done so much more, I feel like, to tie things together. And maybe the reason that I feel this way is because I didn't read Throne of Glass before Crescent City. Like I said, I think I messed up the order that I read these books in. I would not recommend going from ACOTAR to Crescent City. It wasn't a good flow. But either way, world is getting a 3 out of 5 stars. Plot is a 3 out of 5 stars. Now let's talk about the female main character. The female main character for Crescent City is Bryce Quinlan, and we love Bryce, but I don't know if anyone can relate to this. I was so annoyed with her. Like all the time I was just like, okay. Like she frustrated me so much. I felt like I couldn't relate to her. I will say she did go through a big character arc, like where she started in the series versus where she ended up. She did a lot of transformation. However, I didn't feel as connected to her as I have when I've read other series. So she wasn't my favorite. And then not only her, let's move on to Book Boyfriend. Book Boyfriend, guys, he did not do it for me. Hunt Applear is the book boyfriend in this book, and let me just say, there were bits and pieces that I was like, okay, like I see why we like Hunt, but I feel like the main, who I would have liked to be the main male interest in this book was Rune, because I loved Rune. But I found Hunt so just like boring. And I felt like their love didn't feel like, the chemistry wasn't there. And I didn't feel like they were meant to be. Like, I don't know. I just didn't get that feeling of like, yes, this is a couple. They are meant to be together. Like, it wasn't there for me. Tell me if you disagree, because I'd love to know how you feel, but Rune was my favorite male character in that book series. I'm just gonna say. And then we're gonna go to Spice. The Spice that was in the Crescent City series felt very like mature, I guess is the way I want to explain it. When I was reading ACOTAR and the Spice that occurred in that book, it was very like, it wasn't YA. I wouldn't say it was YA, but it felt very like relatable. When I was reading Crescent City, I felt like I opened like an older woman's erotic novel. not even, let's not even take it that far, because it wasn't even like that, but it just made me feel cringy. I didn't love the Spice in that book. And again, I wasn't connected. So Spice gets a 2.5 out of 5. So overall, Crescent City, we gave it a 2.5 for Spice, a 3 for plot, 2 for female main character, 2 for book boyfriend, and 3 for world. So that's our current standings. Let's move on to Throne of Glass. You guys, Throne of Glass was so good. I was not expecting to love that series as much as I did, you guys. Like, when I first saw, I was like, oh my god, this series is 8 books long, however many thousands of pages. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to get through all of this. But it was like one after the other. They were just so good. I couldn't put it down. And like, for me to do that is saying so much. And let me just say, the whole world of Throne of Glass, I loved it so much. There's so many different aspects. Like, we're dealing with pirates. We're dealing with like, I want to say fantasy, but not fantasy. It's like medieval feeling, like king. Like, there's city. There's so many different levels to the Throne of Glass world that I loved. When I was reading Throne of Glass, I felt completely immersed in that world. Like, from the desert scenes to scenes by the ocean to scenes in the mountains, everything about Throne of Glass, I felt it to my core. It was so good. Out of Sarah J. Maas's books, I'm not even gonna lie, Throne of Glass was my favorite. It was so good. If you are planning on getting into the Sarah J. Maas universe, I would highly recommend reading Throne of Glass before Crescent City, because I will say, in terms of world building, it is a bit more complicated than ACOTAR, but that's just because there's a lot going on. It's not just the story of the main character, it's the stories of so many different characters, and everything intertwines. There's depth to it. And the reason I think it's more complicated is not because it's harder to follow. I just think that there's more depth and there's more to grasp onto, and I liked it more, to be completely honest with you. So I gave it a 5 out of 5 for world. Moving on from that, let's talk about plot. And you guys, let's just piggyback right off of that, because the plot is so good. Like I said, there's bits and pieces intertwining, coming together, doing so much, and it just keeps you interested. It keeps you invested. The stakes are so high. There's so many different characters you're cheering for. There's so many different characters you hate. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It makes you laugh. It makes you cry. It makes you feel all of the emotions. It was so good. So I'm sure you guys already know, 5 out of 5 for plot. It was literally the best. It's the best series I've ever read. Whole series, 5 out of 5. Moving on, let's talk about the female main character, because the female main character in this book, you guys, she has a special place in my heart, because literally from the very first book, I was attached to her. I want to say her name, but I don't want to like give out any spoilers, but if you know, you know. She just literally from the beginning, I was cheering for her, I was rooting for her, I wanted the best for her. Like the decisions she makes, her humor, her person, like everything about her is who I want to be as a person. Like she is the best. She at no point in that series was I like, oh my god, shut up, you're being so annoying, because literally she can do no wrong. She's amazing, I love her. But anyways, yes, female main character, Throne of Glass, 5 out of 5. Moving on from there, let's talk about the boyfriend, the main book boyfriend in Throne of Glass. And what I will say about this is there are multiple men in this series that I just get so attached to. I know obviously there's the main book boyfriend, but there's so many other characters in this book that you feel such a strong attachment to, because the thing that I love about this series is you see the character arcs, the development, the love interests, and all these different characters come to fruition, and it was amazing how it all tied together. The main book boyfriend for Throne of Glass is Rowan. And Rowan, chef's kiss, we love Rowan. He is amazing. I feel like his character is so much more like depthful. That's not even a word. I feel like his character is just so much more like we understand levels of his emotions, how he's feeling. He has this very tough exterior, but how his character grows, we love. And for that reason, I wrote down a 3 out of 5, but I'm gonna give him a 3.5 out of 5. The reason I feel like he needs that little extra is because I gave Reese a 3 out of 5 from ACOTAR, and I started to hate him towards the end, but at no point did I hate Rowan. I loved Rowan the whole book. The reason he is missing that extra bit of points, the reason he's not a 5 out of 5 is just because I felt like there were other male characters in this book series that I felt so attached to. Like, I loved Dorian so much more than Rowan. And I know Dorian was not the main book boyfriend, but he has my heart, you guys. He was my favorite from this book series. Like, in all of these series, honestly, except for one, I feel like there's accessory male characters that I loved so much more than the main character, and I wish that they had their own like spin-off books because I would eat it up. So anyways, we're giving Rowan a 3.5 out of 5. So moving on from that, let's talk about the spice. Throne of Glass, I feel like it kind of starts off almost like with a YA vibe. The spice that's in Throne of Glass is very, very, very minimal. Therefore, I'm giving it a 1 out of 5. Spice is not the theme in this book. I wouldn't even say that romance and love is the main theme of Throne of Glass because the plot is so much better. Like, I will say when I'm reading some books and like the plot is so heavy and I'm just like, oh, please just get to the spice, get to the romance. I want to see how these characters are going to end up. I never felt that way reading Throne of Glass. And the reason is because the plot was so good. I just didn't even care about the spice. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind, if that makes sense. So if you're reading a series specifically for spice, you might not love Throne of Glass, but I think you'll love it for a whole other reason because I thought I wasn't going to like it, but it became my favorite series. It's so good. If you need a sign to read Throne of Glass, let this be it. Read it. Read it. It is a roller coaster of emotions. Every single second of that story, I just love. They're all great. So, anyways, Throne of Glass, let's go over our ratings. Spice, we gave it a 1 out of 5. Plot, 5 out of 5. Female main character, 5 out of 5. Book boyfriend, 3.5 out of 5. And world was 5 out of 5. Okay, now let's move on to the 4th series. And it's appropriately the 4th series because it is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Okay, so I finished all of Massiverse. I finished all of Sarah J. Maas's books and I was like, what do I do now? Like, this has changed my life. I feel like a different person. How do I move on from this? And I was like, okay, let's take a little break from fantasy and let's do just like a casual read. And I read Credence. That book, I'll make a series or I'll make a video on like books that are like that, but that book, let me tell you, it sure got me out of Sarah J. Maas universe. But anyways, as soon as I finished that, I was like, all right, give me fantasy, I need it, give me more. And Fourth Wing, you guys, everywhere I looked, it was Fourth Wing this, Fourth Wing that, Violet this, Sorengale, all these things. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna just read it. And at the time I was like, oh, I really don't feel like reading another series. Like, I feel like I just want to read something that's short to like get the satisfaction of, okay, I finished another book. Like, I wanted a short and sweet story. But I fell into Fourth Wing. And you guys, when I read this, and I read this on my Kindle mostly. When I opened this and I saw all the pages, I was like, what? I wanted a short story and this was not it. But the reason I picked that is because it was so popular and I was like, I'm missing out on something. I need to get into Fourth Wing. And I'm so happy that I did. You guys, all of Fourth Wing, like, these 2 books right here, I just finished. I literally just finished the 2nd book. I cannot wait for the 3rd one to come out. It's supposed to come out in January, so stay tuned, guys. We're gonna be going into that. But guys, it's so good. This series, it feels more like Sarah J. Maas's writing, I feel like had a flair of YA that kind of had moments where it became a bit more adult, but the whole feeling to it was very light, I would say. Well, Throne of Glass wasn't really light. ACOTAR, I felt, was very light. Crescent City was light. Throne of Glass was a little heavy, but light for the most part, if that makes sense. Fourth Wing. The depth is there, you guys. Like, the story, the world, everything about it. I love Basgayan. It is so, like, I wouldn't want to live there because I wouldn't want to go through parapet or the things that they go through, but it really immersed me into the world, and the stakes are so high throughout the whole series. You're constantly on the edge of your seat. You're constantly like, oh, we gotta make it, we gotta survive, we gotta get to the next thing. Like, every single bit of it is good. It's so hard to put down. And I know it's a big book. Both of the books are pretty big. But when you're reading it, you don't even realize the time going by and you're like, oh my God, I read 100 pages in one sitting. Like, are you kidding me? This series is so good. And let me just start off. We're gonna start with the world. I gave it a 4 out of 5. The reason it got a 4 out of 5 and lost 1 point is because I felt like I was in that world, like the stakes were high. There was just something that didn't make me feel the way that Throne of Glass's world felt. Throne of Glass just had so many different things going on, and if that's a 5 out of 5 for that world, I just can't put Basgayan that high. You know what I mean? It's great. I love the world that's there, but it's not as deep, if that makes sense. The world building is easy to understand. There's a lot going on, but it's very simple to click in your mind. It was for me anyways, and I just felt myself being very engaged in the world building and even the story building. So let's go to plot. Plot, Fourth Wing, 5 out of 5. Reason it is scoring so high is because, like I said, the stakes are so high. You are constantly like, you're hungry for more. You're like, tell me what's gonna happen next. Where are we going with this? Is she gonna make it? Like, is this person gonna make it? This is another series where there's so many other people involved and you're cheering for all of them in a different way. One thing I will say to be prepared for when you're reading this is to get your heart broken, because people die. You know that that's gonna happen. It is what it is. But anyways, plot, 5 out of 5. You can't beat it. Throne of Glass and Fourth Wing, both plots, 5 out of 5. They were fantastic. I wouldn't change a single thing about them. Moving on, female main character, Violet. I love Violet. And you guys, I said this before, but let me just reiterate. I love a weak character. And I don't mean weak in terms of like, in a bad way. I love to see a character start from the bottom and work their way up, because it's like, you don't read a book to see somebody that's like living the perfect life. They do everything right. You want to see somebody mess up. You want to be there with them through their emotions. You want to be there for the ups, the downs. You want to cheer for them when it's good. You want to cry for them when it's bad. That's what I look for in a character. I want to see them get better throughout the series. I don't want to lose interest and start to hate them as time goes on. I want to grow with them, learn things with them, and I feel like Violet is the perfect character to explain exactly how I feel and how I want my characters to be. Because she starts off, I really don't want to give any spoilers, but the way that she starts off and how she ends, there's so much growth. So much growth. And that's what we love to see. We love women to succeed, and we love our main character to get what she dreams of. Oh my gosh, that sounds so stupid, but honestly, yes. We want our main character to succeed, and we want to see the trials and tribulations. We want to see the hard times. We want to grow. We want to get better. And there's no better series that does that for me that I've read so far. I am just getting started, so we'll see where we end up, but 5 out of 5. Next thing that I will say, boyfriend. All right. Xaden. Xaden is my favorite book boyfriend of all time. He is the only main book boyfriend that I loved from beginning to end. There was so much like, what trope is it? This series so wasn't like tropey and like for the sake of like adding romance. Like, it was enemies to lovers so naturally, and in a way that didn't make me feel cringy, and in a way that just, it made me love Xaden with her. And the way that Xaden wasn't perfect throughout the whole story, like, that's another thing that I hate. The main book boyfriend, he can't be perfect. And this is how I feel in real life too. If everything is perfect all the time, if your man is always nice to you, or if your partner is always nice to you, if you're always getting exactly what you want, there's no, like, there's nothing to keep you going. You know what I mean? It's just like, ugh, I know I'm gonna get what I want, but you want somebody who makes mistakes, who admits to their mistakes, who grows from their mistakes, who changes things. You can see how their love grows throughout the story. Like, if I had to draw this, when you're looking at Akatar, like, this is gonna be so stupid. I will add like a little chart or something in here. But, so Reese and Farah at the beginning, it was like, it went straight up, and then to me it went straight down. Because I wasn't like, as soon as they were in love and they were together, I was just like, all right, I'm done with him. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't interesting to me anymore, and I didn't care. But Xaden and Violet, it was like a steady buildup, and then they were there. They didn't come back down, which makes me nervous because I think there's gonna be, well, I know that there's gonna be several more books. I don't know how many are supposed to be in the series, but if things are going like this at the beginning of the book, I'm nervous to see how they're gonna end up in future books for this series, because this series is unfinished. We don't know what's gonna happen next. So we will find out. But what I will say for right now, and maybe I'm gonna look back on this video in like several months and I'll be like, why did I give him a 5 out of 5? But you know what? Right now, he is my favorite main book boyfriend, and it's getting a 5 out of 5. I love Xaden. Okay, in terms of spice, this book had, out of the 4 series that we're talking about today, this book had my favorite spice. And it wasn't even, like, the main point of this book, again, is not spice, but the spice that was in the book, I felt like was needed. It relieved tension, it made sense. It wasn't just like thrown into the book for the sake of having spice in a book. Everything that happened made sense, and I liked it, if that makes sense. For that reason, I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5. And that's the highest out of any of the books here. And I wouldn't say necessarily that it's just because the spice was better. I just feel like it was appropriate in the story, if that makes sense. These characters, to me, Violet and Xaden, felt more mature to me than any of the other characters in the other series. And it felt like the spice wasn't out of place. So let's go over our rankings. Fourth Wing. For spice, got a 3.5 out of 5. Plot, 5 out of 5. Female main character, 5 out of 5. Main book boyfriend, 5 out of 5. And world, 4 out of 5. So let's go over all of the scores and see how we rank. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. We gave Crescent City total score 12.5. Next up, ACOTAR got a 17. Throne of Glass got a 19.5, and in first place we have Fourth Wing with 22.5. So you guys, this is kind of my roundup of the 4 biggest fantasy romantasy series that I read this year. I think it wasn't just that I read them. I feel like everybody has been reading these books lately, so I hope you guys agree. But honestly, if you don't, tell me. I would love to read the comments. I want to see what you guys have to say. Like I said, I have no one to talk to about these books, and I would love to know your thoughts, because maybe you'll change my mind. I don't know. But either way, tell me how they rank for you guys, because I'm so curious. And either way, thank you guys so much for watching. This was so fun, and I will be uploading, like I said, since this is going to be kind of like my Vlogmas, I'm going to be uploading literally every other day, kind of as like a kickoff for my channel. So if you want to see more, be sure to like, subscribe, and I will be back soon. Bye!